Hello and welcome. My name is Trismegistus, and today we're going to be reading through and speculating about the latest Factorio Friday Facts. Friday Facts 384, Combinators 2.0, posted by Covarex and Clonan. Hello, we are going to focus on the general improvements of the way circuit networks is used in the game. I wasn't using it often because all the problems combined made it too big of a hassle most of the time, which was an indication of problems. So, we improved each part of the process of using it a little, from UI to feedback of what is going on, to stronger, more accessible combinator functionality. I can say that it worked, or at least for me. Once these changes were available, I used the circuit network way more in my latest playthrough, and it felt good, so let's hope it won't be just me. Circuit GUIs rework. We learned over the years that it is always better to use disabled, enabled state on control elements which can be turned on or off, compared to just making them just disappear. Circuit Control GUI was one of the last pieces in the game where we didn't apply it properly. So you can see the functionality even before connecting the wire or activating the individual modes. With the current version in mind, it is hard to understand our previous design, with the checkboxes being disconnected from their parameters. It makes the UI not only more chaotic, but also bigger. Well, we all learn from our mistakes. So this is referring to these two side-by-side GIFs. One is showing 1.1, things magically popping out of thin air. This is the current version of the game. And 2.0, all elements present and enabled, disabled when needed. As you can instantly see, it's a much smaller interface. We've got, fewer elements to it. Well, no, we've got the same elements, but we've got fewer sort of checkboxes and I don't suppose there are actually, we're looking at it. It's not really fewer checkboxes, but what there are. So basically, as you click these various buttons, it adds in the element of the GUI that it refers to. So when you want to enable disable, that pops up, and because you want a condition on it. And when you want to set train limit, the input signal train limit appears. Whereas in the new version of the GUI, it's basically all there to start with, and you simply, by clicking the button, you enable that section or you turn it on. So it's always there and you can see what it is. I would say this is a good one of an example of where it's very confusing for new players. I certainly found this when I was clicking these through. It wasn't obvious, I remember, what they meant until the thing actually popped up. So you would click it and then you go, oh, so that's what that's talking about. And that's what I have to do. And even now, I'll open some of these up and click the thing and think, wait, is that what I want? Or do I want that? Or do I want the other one? And now if it's all here, you can just literally instantly see, oh, right, well, that's, to do with train count. That's to do with train ID. That's to do with limits. And it's just enabling and disabling the functions. So it is a much nicer and simpler and cleaner interface. Circuit slots show the values. This is one of those features that we just can't imagine living without anymore. And it is so simple, we wonder why we never did it before. In short, the signals in the slots of the circuit GUIs will show the current signal value directly in the slot. This makes it super simple when setting up a condition to know what ballpark of value you need to set. It gives immediate feedback during the process of setting up the connection or condition without having to close the GUI and then hunt for the information in a nearby power pole tooltip. So the picture this is referring to has the caption saying the slots showing the values. And what it's really referring to is these numbers, basically. So it didn't used to give you this actual number. You would be able to set, this same condition that steel has to be less than 0, which is a weird condition, but I think that's just the default. Well, I suppose it depends what it's connected to, doesn't it? But negative steel is a bit odd. If it's connected to a box, I suppose it could be a general network thing. But basically, it's just giving fairly random, I think, examples of, it's saying that the control signal has now got 4 on it, the close signal is 1 and the red signal is 1, this coal signal it's getting 100 and the condition is for it to be more than 50, the output signal here is A57 because it's reading a charge level, and A is the assigned charge for accumulators, A for accumulator. So yeah, it's basically just saying that you get the information you want now, and that is really convenient. Particularly, these examples are just here, as an illustration, but when you've got a very large network and you've got a lot of signals, particularly something like a walls, where there's a wall set of conditions, you might be ordering up, say, 30 items or something. You could have a lot of signals and you would have to hunt through power poles and all sorts of other things, connected wires and other boxes and all sorts of that, to work out how many you had, how many you didn't have, how many you wanted, how many you were, negatively requesting for it to to send more, and now it just literally, when you connect the wire up, it's going to show you the control signals. So here we've got, multiple control signals going on of different types and different stripes, and you can just see what they are. Really, really nice quality of life improvement. Decider Combinator 2.0. The Decider Combinator's function is to help make logical decisions. For instance, if iron plate is greater than 10, turn on a lamp. It can only process a single condition, which is touted as a feature for the simplicity and eloquence of design, that you build up a complex machine from many simple parts. However, in practice, it made its use in even slightly more complex situations cumbersome. For example, if you want to enable a lamp when your chest has 100 steel, 200 copper and 10 coal, you would need quite a few decider combinators. What was a funny realisation is that using train schedules with the circuit conditions, you could make yourself a much more powerful decider combinator. So just to comment on that, I'd never really thought about that. Basically what they're saying is if you plonk down a train station, because it has an and and or type system, and you can set limits on it, you can connect that station, and I say I've never done this, and it's only sort of really occurring to me reading this through, but if you connect that station to whatever network you've got, then you give it a load of signals, and you just sort of say an enable condition on the station, for example, it could be anything, but you're setting a turn on condition based on, say, having a signal of 100 steel, 200 copper and 10 coal, and you can set an AND condition on those so it can check all three at the same time, and suddenly it's a single point of doing a logic system. This is actually one of the reasons I struggle with the circuit network, because my brain works in we'll come on to it later, and this is a brilliant, I was massively excited about this picture that's coming up. But this is, my brain works in I can do coding, I've done coding. And so when you have effectively what are case conditions or nested ands, ors, Boolean logic checks, I know how to do that, I know how to program it. And so I always feel really dumb when I'm trying to set it up in the circuit network, because every single one of those conditions needs a separate decider combinator, and you have to do like them chained, and like you can't just do you can't do ands basically properly. You can, but it's really weird and complicated. But you can't just say, if this is greater than 100, this is greater than 200, and this is greater than 10, then true. You have to do that with each of those being a separate check, outputting a signal that is a yes, and then something else has to check those all of those yeses, and say, they're all true. So it can't be an exclusive AND, or you can't do those sorts of checks without really complicated wiring up. And for me in my head, it's a very simple nested if statement or what have you. And it, turning that back into separate combinators was always really complicated. So yeah, so I say we'll continue on, but I say this is one of the best quality of life improvements I've ever seen, because it just makes it so much easier. So it felt that, while simplicity is good, it was too simple and was making basic setups more complicated than they needed to be. It was also awkward trying to troubleshoot circuit networks, opening all the different deciders to see what is happening and where it went wrong. And I would absolutely 100% agree with that. Not only was it complicated to work out how to build those decider combinators, chained together, working out what had gone wrong, so bug fixing it basically was a nightmare. And I would often just restart and say, right, well, I've obviously messed this up, let's just build a new one and see if we can get it right this time. So we decided on a few key features of what we called Decider Combinator 2.0. 1. Multiple conditions with and or combinations. 2. Quick visual representation of the signal state. 3. Selection of input between red and green wires. 4. Multiple outputs. So then this is the exact diagram this is the picture I was really excited about, the GUI of the Decider Combinator 2.0. And suddenly we flip from having to chain loads of combinators together to do even very simple logic checks to a single decider combinator being able to do nested, complex, really detailed checks, in a single shot. And it's a really nice layout that they've come up with, for doing that, and it's based clearly on the trains, because you've got that and or condition going on, and you've got these brackets around like it does on trains, and basically this is saying if this condition is true or this condition is true, then output whatever these conditions are. It's also telling you what the input signals are. So if you're trying to do something based on, you've already put the right amount in a chest, you can see how many you put in just as a quick, really easy reference. And you can also check what you've hooked up. Have you hooked the right things up to these chests? On the output side, and this is another massive one, multiple outputs. So you don't have to chain together loads of things to get, different checks going on and then combine those together in a separate check and work out some weird pseudo logic for multiple checks of, well, if this one's true and that one's true, then output E, and if E signal is 2, then that becomes a true, and it's all in one thing. And this is so much like a graphical way of presenting Boolean code, Boolean checks in a code. I was just ecstatic. It was like, wow, this is... I might actually use the logic network for something complicated, not just something very simple. The other things that are a massive change, well, the multiple outputs is a massive change, but the other thing that's a massive change is being able to toggle between the red and the green. So it's now up to you, kind of, you can hook them in, but it doesn't matter anymore. You're not having to say, and this was always really fiddly in the game, particularly when you have a very high resolution monitor, finding the red one, the green one, particularly when they're all stuck together, they're all really close, and making sure that red is hooked up to red, is hooked up to green, is hooked up to red, is hooked up to... It's an absolute nightmare. And here you can just literally say, ignore the green signal. And it allows you to do multiple checks then and multiple things with the same combinator. This is such a massive improvement. But as I say, it's simple. And I can see why they were really like, how did we live without this? Because it just gets rid of just a whole nauseous part of the game. Just amazing. As you can tell, I'm really loving this change. It's a bit weird. The big and spectacular ones are great, but this smaller stuff and the quality of life stuff for me is like almost as exciting, or if not more exciting sometimes, because it's just making the whole game better. And even if you play, if you get Space Age and you don't like it, or you don't even bother getting it, you're getting all these improvements in the game. You don't have to pay for this. They couldn't implement this without changing the base game. So everyone's getting this. So even if you don't ever play Space Age, you're just getting a better way of doing logic. It's just brilliant. And it says, with these changes, the usage of combinators became so much easier, intuitive and transparent. You can easily see by opening the GUI what is the state of the signals, how the logic is constructed, and what the end goal of the decision is. Spot on. Perfect change. Description for all combinators. You may have noticed it in a few previous Friday Facts images. We now added a custom description field to all the combinators. This will make it easy to remember what the combinator is doing, how it works, etc. It is stored in blueprints and so will be invaluable for copying in someone else's insane contraptions. And then we just got a screen capture here showing that. And the description part is the bit down. It's a little easy to get, not realise that this is the bit they're adding. But it's the part down at the bottom here where it says description. If the power of the accumulators drops below 20%, which would usually be an A signal, but it looks like you can just use the combinator. The accumulator now rather than just A. But anyway, if that drops below 20%, this will kick on the emergency steam power. This will kick on the steam engines with the green tick signal. So it's saying output the green tick if it goes below 20. And you can see that in the logic, it's getting 100. It doesn't care where it's coming in from. It's saying if that value goes below 20, so the less than, then output the signal, just green tick with a 1. And of course you've got the option to do input count. You can put any signal there or what have you, as well as doing now lots of other add outputs. Also, it will signal the programmable speaker to send an alert so we know what's happening. Presumably there's a programmable speaker just off the corner there, and that speaker will be set to turn on or send an alert if green tick goes to 1. So yeah, not a huge one. Nice though, particularly adding descriptions. We've got descriptions in other things, there's like blueprints and stuff like that, but nice to just have that there, particularly, you think for logic where it could get quite complicated. Nice to just be able to put in a little description saying what it does, particularly if you've saved this into a blueprint and someone's just using it and, maybe wants to reconfigure it or change it or just understand what it's doing. Input and output on arithmetic combinators. Once we got used to the input and output slots of the new decider, we started to miss it when using the arithmetic combinator. So we added it there too, and made a side-by-side layout. So next one then, just showing that in the game where we've got input signals and output signals as we do in the other one, and it's just showing you what the maths is. And I can never remember what these are. I always have to look at the tooltip, but I think it's basically everything. So I guess, does that make sense? It's difficult to tell without sort of seeing it, but you're getting these input signals, it's doing whatever that is, and outputting the everything signal. Yeah, it must be multiplying it by -2. I'm not, if I'm 100% entirely sure, I understand why one of these are red and those are green. Or maybe it's the red and the green? That's the other option, isn't it? That these signals are coming in on the green and these are coming on the red? I think that probably makes more sense, actually. Yeah, I suspect that's probably what it is. You're getting both of those in, and it's outputting everything. It's interesting they've not given the option to decide between them. I suppose if you're sending stuff to a arithmetic combinator, then you want it to be doing maths, and you wouldn't want it to select between them. But it's interesting that it doesn't have that option. Although, as I say, because I now think this is red and green sides, that perhaps you've sort of got that option, because you could just say those and those, but you can't do the maths between them, I guess. Interesting. The Selector Combinator. We hinted at a new combinator type a few times before, and it was certainly interesting to read about the different guesses people made. This post from Kalinda from Reddit seems to be the closest guess, so congratulations on winning the guessing game. This is a selector combinator. The primary function of it was motivated by a specific operation which was very cumbersome to do and practically impossible to do in a generic way. The function is indexing signals to process them one by one in some additional logic. For example, if you have a list of needed materials, you can use the selector combinator to index the first item, another to index the second item, etc. We've then got a picture of this in-game, and the caption says the new Selector Combinator. The Selector Combinator has these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 symbols, and that appears to tie up, from what I can tell, with these, I think, because we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Huh. So, because select inputs, they've just told us, is that diagonally arrow one. That sort of, chart one. Count inputs, you would expect that because hash is often used as a counting symbol, the number of something. Random input, question mark, would make sense. Stack size would be that one, I guess. That's meant to represent a stack. Interesting symbol. Rocket capacity, that sort of does look like a bit of a rocket. So maybe this one doesn't have a specific symbol because it's a modifier to these, perhaps. Obviously, we've got also the button here for the adding the description. But my interpretation of these is what it actually says in the bit below, so maybe we'll come back to that. It has some specific uses and modes, which are still subject to change. Firstly, output the signal at the given index sorted from biggest to smallest or vice versa. 2. Output the count of input signals. 3. Output a random signal from the inputs with a custom update interval. Output the stack size of the input item. Output the rocket capacity of the input item, useful for space-age logistics. Transfer the quality of an input signal. More on that in another day, perhaps. Some of these could have been solved with custom signals in other places, like a stack size signal for arithmetic combinators, or to output the stack size of items, but we decided to go this way for cleanliness of design and better discoverability. Since the scope of the selector combinator is quite broad, there is also room for further functions we could give it. If you have any ideas, we would welcome them. So let's just go back to that and sort of see which is which then. So you've got the output signal at the given index, sorted from biggest to smallest, or vice versa. So that's that one, isn't it? Select index, select input index, sort descending, sort ascending. So basically the idea, I think, with it is you've got it's hooked up in such a way that it's looking at, say, 10 different items, and effectively it's doing a list sort, like a sort, basically, which is a function you can or something you can program in most sort of languages, essentially. And it's basically saying, right, we'll put the smallest first in the list and the largest the last in the list, and have them go in ascending order. You can then flip that because you've got a toggle button as to it could be largest to smallest or smallest to largest, and that's why the symbol sort of makes sense. But what it's saying is that you can select which one it outputs, I believe. So it then says, you're basically giving it an index and saying, right, tell me which is the third largest, tell me which is the fourth largest, tell me which is the smallest. So that's what that's trying to do. I can imagine situations where that would be, useful, but it is. I think really this thing is effectively trying to provide functions that, in a sense, you could achieve with the other combinators, but you'd end up with a massive array of combinators that only some genius would be able to put together, because it's doing things, sort or bubble sorting, that type of thing, that you would do in a code block, in a function, in a single combinator. So it's giving you much more power. Next one on the list then is output the count of input signals. So that's got to be them, hasn't it? Count inputs. So we're going to be able to do all sorts of weird things with this, like modular math and all that, which is going to be really, it's going to be interesting to see what people do. I don't think I'm smart enough to do a lot of that, but it's going to be really interesting to see how people use these. But count inputs is clearly there, and that will literally tell you, I would assume, a count of how many inputs you're getting. So you can instantly see, well, this combinator is receiving 5 inputs, and you could then use that in combination, presumably with another one doing this, to say, tell me what the smallest one is, tell me what the biggest one is, that sort of thing. I mean, even just leaping, again, at walls, you could use that very easily to see, right, well, what have I got the least of at this wall, particularly like a death world or something like that, where you're getting massively attacked all the time. What's running out here? Do I need to get more production of ammo or artillery, or what's the priority here? And that would be quite an interesting use of that. How it works with fluids, which have a different sort of scaling to them, I don't know, but because they would always kind of come up out of the top, basically, you would expect. Okay, so then next one is output a random signal from the inputs with a custom update interval. So this is random input. This one here, update interval. So it's literally, I mean, I can't think of any use cases for that. I'm sure clever people can, but it's literally going, right, it's got a list of 5 things coming in, randomly select one out of that list, and do so every, 10 seconds, 1 second, 15 seconds, whatever, range it lets you do. I say I can't really think of instantly a use for that, but, I'm sure someone will. Next one is output the stack size of the input item, which is just that one. That's interesting, because you can kind of do that. Stack size of the input item, because that's effectively the count. Oh no, stack size. So that means literally how many is in each stack, isn't it? So it's not. I was thinking that meant how many items there were, but if you've got a signal of 500. Coal or something like that, then it stacks to 50. So it literally goes through and tells you this item stacks to 50. So you could see, coming back to that modular math thing, you could say, right, well, if I've got 500 and a stack size is 50 that I can do that math on, then I know I've got 10 stacks. And therefore, they could fit in a train or something like that. Feels like it's coming back to space age type questions of, well, I don't want to send this rocket unless it's got a stack of inserters. Do the maths on that to make that happen. Make sure, make it request 50. And I say you could see like dynamic logic going on where it's sort of saying just set, get it to order in a stack of whatever item I want rather than just one. Because we had this question about with a rocket, will it just launch if it's got a request for one inserter? Well, you could force it to say no, only launch if it's got a stack of inserters. So that might be, an example usage of that. Output the rocket capacity of the input item. So, of the input item. Okay, so this is quite a complicated check that it's doing here then, because it's basically saying, because we know a rocket has a weight limit, that will mean a different stack size for different items, because we know that some items are very heavy. No, it's not stack size, it's capacity, isn't it? So we know certain items are very heavy. I don't know, say, nuclear power plants or something. If it can only hold one, then we can get it to request one, basically, or we can do some maths where it only builds one if we can only send one, or, nukes or something like that. Maybe get it to order a nuke every time it decides it needs a nuke or something like that. So I say that sounds like a really nice compression of quite a complicated checking thing. And as I say, it's very much geared towards space age because this weight thing, the stack sizes, the quantity that can be ordered for a rocket for a particular item is going to be different to a stack size, as in an inventory stack size. The last one then is transfer the quality of an input signal. More on that on another day perhaps. So I guess that's saying there maybe is a separate symbol for that and it's not a modifier. That would make sense, and perhaps they've just not decided how they're going to do it. It's interesting that they wouldn't explain that, because if you think about it, they've told us about quality, they've told us about rocket capacity size. What's the subtlety that, or I guess maybe incomplete feature that is the reason for them not telling us about that? That's interesting. I wonder what that could be. And I say, why not just show it? This is not the last post about circuit networks. Since the decider combinator's ability to specify from which wires it should read in is very nice, we plan to make more improvements in this direction also on other places. There are new things entities do with the circuit network, but that is for another time. As always, let us know what you think at the usual places. So yeah, just ending off with some hints and sort of teasers for future content. The decider's ability to specify from which wires it should read is very nice. And they might plan to make other improvements. So it feels like perhaps they've not done that in other places, but having created this functionality where you've got the ticky boxes there, they've kind of realised that that's actually really going to, or could be really useful in other things, or could be interesting. And what those places would be, we'll have to see. But it sounds like they've not actually worked those up yet. The other one, though, the new things entities do with circuit networks, but it's for another time. So that's basically telling us, there is more coming with circuit networks. What? I don't know, but I'm really excited to find out. Okay, well, overall thoughts are that it's brilliant. As I mentioned earlier on, I really love these sorts of quality of life improvements. And this is like a combination one. We've got a really, 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 really good quality of life improvement with the 2.0 version of Combinators, where basically we now don't need, I mean, you'll end up with it, I'm sure, but you now don't need stacks and stacks of combinators to do even relatively simple checks, and you don't need to think of these weird sort of workaround ways of getting it to output a different signal and then looking at that signal in another combinator. You can just literally build that logic, off you go. Brilliant. And as I say, this has been one of my biggest sticking points with the Combinator network. I understand how to do Boolean logic. I mean, I don't get it right all the time. I understand how to do it, though. And the fact that it was all broken up into all these different combinators always was just a massive headache that meant I usually didn't bother. It's like the root cause of my brute force approach to most problems. I rarely use combinators and subtle things. It's all just limited chests and, hard-coded numbers effectively and stuff like that. And now we can do properly complicated things. I'm going to use this. The other big change, and say the other side to this, it's not just a quality of life improvement. We are getting these selector combinators. It's really interesting that they're basically saying, is there anything you might want out of this? And, send them some suggestions. I don't have any necessarily, because I haven't really had the time to think about it. But yeah, I mean, to me, that also implies that it will be moddable, basically, and modders will be able to add other functions to these. That could be really interesting. You could get some really nice, functional ways of doing it. I'm not necessarily sure it will definitely do that, but, that will be interesting. One of the things that is in my mind is whether this, the Selector Combinator, the sort of open question I've got, is this a 2.0 base game feature, or is this space age only? It does obviously have the rocket capacity and quality. Now what does that mean? Because the other functions you could use on any other system. Rocket capacity and quality transfer are exclusive to the paid expansion, not just the base game. So does that mean this is locked to the expansion? or is it a base game feature, and then you get these extra bits when you turn them on? I think it's probably the latter, but we'll have to see. There is no specific word on whether these are coming in for into the base game, or are they just for the expansion. I hope you enjoyed today's Friday Facts video and might consider coming back for another one. If you want to chat about the latest Friday Facts, then you can find me live streaming Factorio every Saturday over my Twitch channel at Trismegistus. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Spot on. Perfect change.